So, do you want to know one of Canada's deepest, darkest secrets? Well, we legalized medical assistance in dying in 2016. And since then, Canada is the only jurisdiction where this has skyrocketed. We're talking 15 to 16% growth year over year. Since 2016, approximately 60 to 70,000 people have chosen MAiD. That's 16 times higher than the state of California, who also legalized medical assistance in dying in 2016, who also has a similar population to Canada. So, why the heck is Canada so much higher than California and also other jurisdictions around the world? Canada has two tracks for medical assistance in dying. The first track is where death is certain and you have a terminal illness or disease and the pain is inextricable. Basically, track one is where death is foreseeable, although there have been instances where doctors have admitted people with years left to live. Track two is where death is not foreseeable, but the suffering is intolerable. There's also more checks in track two. There's also not as many people choosing track two for medical assistance in dying. But what's interesting about the intolerable suffering, it also includes financial stress, housing stress, and loneliness as causes or as contributing factors to intolerable suffering. Now, of course, if all of us are going through these different moments in our lives, the natural reaction by many doctors is, hey, have you thought about therapy? Have you thought about other means, meditation, journaling, other ways? Well, here in Canada, that can cause the basis for track two for MAiD. Now, again, I don't want to over sensationalize this. It is very difficult and there are still many checks, but it's still the basis for track two to become qualified. And again, let me reiterate, most of the growth of Canada's MAiD is not track two. It's track one where death is foreseeable. But here's where it gets tricky, because if you have an intolerable suffering, you have a chronic illness or disease, and death is foreseeable, doctors can sometimes bring up MAiD as an option, which may or may not go aligning with your ethics, but that would be considered undue influence by a medical practitioner about your choice of whether to live or not. And so this brings up medical ethics issues. Why would a doctor or a practitioner who's sworn an oath to preserve life now tell you about an option for MAiD? Now, I mentioned this in my last video, but one thing that's interesting about medical assistance in dying is the numbers by race. Here in Canada, 95.8% of all MAiD cases are from those identifying as Caucasian or the white community. Again, this is statistically much higher than the white community in Canada, which represents about 72%. So white people are choosing MAiD in higher numbers than any other group. And it's not just Canada. In California, where white people make up 35% of the population. Let me just remind you, white people make up 35% of the population in California. 85% of their MAiD cases are from those identifying as Caucasian. So a strong and higher number of MAiD cases from the white community in both California and Canada. It's interesting to see this because one thing I've noticed is the lack of family connection, spirituality, and meaningful friendships and relationships that many of my white friends have. Now, of course, this is just my opinion. We're living in Toronto, one of the major cities here in Canada, North America. But I'd love to know what you think, because when I talk to my white friends, they don't have those strong family connections that myself or others do. In fact, I've posed this to friends many times, is how many times do you visit your family? And it's very few and far between. Sometimes we don't think about the impact that has for someone's ability to feel connected to the society in which they find themselves in. I just want to put some things into perspective for those that are critical of my take and are saying, you know what, Christopher, MAiD is a very progressive choice and Canada is very progressive for having MAiD as widely available as it is. And perhaps the numbers are understated because more people don't know about MAiD and they don't know that you can access it. But I just want to put this into perspective, okay? So MAiD accounts for 4.8% of all our deaths in Canada, okay? 4.8%, although I think they call it like provisions or something like that. They don't actually call it deaths. But regardless, 4.8% of deaths are MAiD. The Netherlands has had MAiD for 32 years. Actually, it's had it for longer than that. It took them 32 years to get to 4.8%, and it was a slow, gradual process to get there. Canada got there in 7 years. I mean, it's pretty mad when you think about the numbers and It begs the question of what's really going on here. I mean, some have even said that Canada's this global leader in state-sanctioned euthanasia. Not exactly the term or method we really want for our country, at least for some of us at least. Even in California, folks, to get MAiD, they don't have 2 tracks, they have 1 track. You have to, it's where death is foreseeable. There has to be a 6-month prognosis that's required, mandatory palliative care consults, and there's no such thing as same-day approvals. But here in Canada, you can get a same-day approval for MAiD. Now, there are even some reports, although they're not as much as I've been able to find, but there are evidence of doctors pushing patients to forego treatment and switch from track 2 to track 1. Again, I don't want to state that that is happening by and large, but there are cases of that happening, and that should bring us cause for concern. And yes, there are same-day approvals here in Canada for MAiD. Now, I know everyone's situations are different. Some people will say, well, my dad or my grandfather or my parent couldn't access it. There's no such thing as same-day approvals. There are such thing as same-day approvals. It is documented. It is true for Canada. But regardless of what you think about MAiD, whether you think it's like this progressive policy or you think it's regressive, everyone on all sides of the spectrum should point out that the numbers don't lie. The numbers are growing dramatically in Canada, unlike any other jurisdiction that has MAiD legalized. And we as Canadians should be asking the question, what's really going on? What separates Canada from the rest of the world when it comes to MAiD? Certainly, there is a small segment of the population that truly believes MAiD is the best way to, choose the end of their life, regardless if death is certain or not. MAiD should be available for the person regardless. But it's also very alarming that our numbers are growing in the numbers in which it is and within the communities in which it is, leading me to wonder, is enough support being provided to the individual from health practitioners when someone is contemplating the idea of suicide, or at least broaching that topic? There's a bunch of medical ethics issues here, but I would say it's more important that we talk about the supports for the individual. Now, if the individual still believes after those supports have been exhausted that ending their life is the only way they want to live their life, now, there's a lot of research to show that with sustained interactions through focus groups, mental health supports, journaling, etc., suicidal ideation goes down dramatically. And this is true. There was a study done with quadriplegics as well. So that tells me that there is evidence that your brain is malleable. You can change the way you look at your environment, the way you interpret your environment, the way you react to your environment. And shouldn't that be the kind of guiding North Star of our medical practitioners? And the idea that MAiD could be even suggested as an idea runs the risk of coercing someone who's already quite vulnerable to now selecting MAiD as now it's just the way they want to live their life. But anyways, let me know what you think about this. I'm personally absolutely shocked at the numbers in Canada, letting me know that this needs to be discussed in much more detail than it currently is. Let me know what you think in the comment section below.